My name is Jamie Piles. I joined Samaritan in December of 1996. We were homeschooling our kids, and we were already thinking outside the world's box, if you will. And I saw a little tiny classified ad about this new kind of idea I'd never heard of before. My first reaction was, that's the kind of thing that we would do, isn't it? And so I finally called the number, talked to them, and the more I asked them questions, the more I liked their answers.
Hey y'all, we got a great show coming at you. We're going to talk about retirement.
Oh,
going on vacation.
Yes.
Life work balance. Life work balance.
Yes.
You know, all that good stuff with our friend David Bahnsen. Welcome to Cross Politics on the Fight Lab Feast Network. Pastor Toby talking on the Water Boy. It's good to be with you. Great show.
Samaritan Ministries connects Christians across the nation who care for one another spiritually and financially when a medical need arises. You choose your healthcare providers, and it may be more affordable than what you're paying now. When the body of Christ comes together to pray, encourage, and provide for one another, burdens are lifted and God is glorified. This applies to all areas of life, including healthcare. Check out Samaritan Ministries, and if it's the right fit for you and your family, you can even join today. Let them know you heard it here on Cross Politics.
That's right.
So go to SamaritanMinistries.org/crosspolitic podcast. That's what it says. Oh, that's new. All right. Hey, we're grateful to have back with us our favorite punk rock economist.
That's right.
David Bahnsen.
There's more than one?
Yeah. He still lives in New York, though.
Hey, no, he's that punk rock.
That's true.
He's that punk rock. David Bahnsen.
You know what I can tell? I can tell Gabe hasn't read the book yet because
That's right, because he talks about
I talk about you in the book.
Oh, no.
I haven't gotten that far. I have read it. I just haven't gotten that far. Then that's
Yeah,
funny.
no, it's at the very end. In fairness, it's in the conclusion.
Yeah, so that was his test. See if you finished the book.
That's great.
Founder, managing partner, and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group. You can hear his financial insights weekly on his podcast, Capital Record, and at the Dividend Cafe. His brand new book, Full Time. It comes out today. Is that really true?
That's right.
Yeah,
Today?
today's the day, as in Tuesday.
Oh, man.
That's right.
That's awesome. David, thanks for coming back on Cross Politic.
I love being on with you guys. I loved being with you in person in Moscow a few months back, and I'm very, very happy to be with you now. And I'm very happy to explain to Gabe what I meant about this New York thing in the book.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I'm trying to look for it right now.
Can I read something to you real quick?
Yes, please.
Let's start here.
You're probably better.
Let's start here.
I came down to a coffee shop right near the East River on First Avenue in New York City to write this conclusion. I've written this book in several different spots over a 5-month period, but I find particular inspiration in New York City, not only because of what it has meant, my life and career, but because of the energy, drive, and aspiration that have always been the pulse of this city. I'm a Southern California guy, blah, 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 moving on. And here's what I want to get to. Any Christian adult who lives in or visits New York City is probably asked by other Christians around the country, how do you stand it there? People are rarely subtle in expressing either their disapproval or confusion that a suburban Christian guy like me could not only spend so much time in New York, but move my family here, and most shocking of all, really love it. I used to think the motivator of this suburban or rural Christian aversion to New York City was ignorance or fear, the misperception of a mostly unsaved, left-leaning city, like every single city in the country. They see reports on right-wing TV about crime or traffic and adopt a non-specific negative view. It's pretty harmless and extremely common. But that is not what I now believe drives most Christian hostility to a place like New York City.
Okay.
As I've dug deeper into this subject and analyzed both my love for this city and the antipathy others have towards it, I'm convinced that a central driver in the animosity evangelicals in particular feel towards New York City is its aforementioned energy, drive, and aspiration. Indeed, the city's pulse is repugnant to many Christians. Their knee-jerk aversion to the ambition, work, and ethos of a place like Manhattan has in a lot of ways been the subject of this book.
I don't see my name in there, though.
No, I didn't have to.
He was talking about you. I thought you were going to say it was the Yankees.
Oh, yeah. Damn Yankees.
Yeah.
Read the part where you talk about me. Read that part.
Oh, you're covered. That's chapter 7. We'll get to it.
That's funny. That's exactly
David,
That's right.
as someone who has been, really seriously so.
Knox is a retirement disaster. That's chapter
Well,
7.
I made that up.
That's chapter
I made
7.
that up.
As someone who has been seriously so financially successful, why is writing a book on full-time work so important to you?
And not buying a yacht.
Yeah, it is. It is certainly not for the royalties. I assure you of that.
Right. You don't need this.
Very similarly to The Crisis of Responsibility, my first book, and to No Free Lunch, the 250 Economic Truths book that came out, which was my last book. I only have any desire or time to write about topics if I care deeply about the message and believe that somehow marginally I can say something that I might have some credibility or ability to exert an influence in. So this is entirely missional. And I don't say this for virtue signaling or anything like that, but this message in particular, I care about so much, more than almost anything. And I particularly care about it for the Christian audience that is largely the target of this book. And I believe that there is cultural leverage in us sort of reframing our understanding of this issue. There's all sorts of theological issues that can move the needle, but I think there's other people that can express those messages better than I can, have more expertise, more passion. On this particular topic, I doubt there are a lot of people that have more passion than I do for it. But then even on the kind of credibility side, I would like to think that I am able to use some biographical and anecdotal context to add to the delivery of the message.
David, I grew up in a good Christian family. My dad was a blue-collar pipe fitter and managed fabs at like Intel and Texas Instruments and stuff. And so I kind of grew up just knowing that I need to work hard. But what kind of happened in I have to believe that there's like a personal, revelation that happened in your life around this issue, because I never really thought about like the theological implications, honestly, until, I think here and there I have, but really till this last year when we had our live show with you at the New Art here in town. What was going on in your life where you thought about like hard work and its biblical implications for our current context?
Well, so now I was sort of teasing you before about the New York thing in the conclusion, but now I realize you haven't read the introduction or chapter 1 either.
No, I'm teeing you up. This is how
okay.
I have
David, can I answer?
done that.
Can I answer
Because you did read it, and so you're just teeing me up to come in and
That's what it
That's
was.
what it's
right down the middle of
does.
the. Yeah, see, I misread you. You're right. You just put that right down the strike zone, and now I get to swing the bat. Yeah, look, there's two things I would say. The first is more early and formative in my adult life, and it was the death of my father. It was starting off my adult life right at the time where I lost him. And it fundamentally changed not just all the obvious things, the personal trauma of the event, because a lot of people listening that are familiar with him, and I think you guys are, he was a magnificent person and thinker, writer, speaker. He was an incredible man of God. Mm-hmm. But he also was my best friend. I mean, we were inseparably close. So that was an event that affected me in every way you could imagine, to lose someone like him who meant what he meant to me at that stage of life, just getting ready to start my 20s. Yeah. And he was not a financially secure person in terms of, there was not money to leave for us to go start adult life with. Right. My mom was already gone. I was just alone in the world.
Wow.
And so that was the biographical context to where I now say to people, when some folks say like, look, I'm a little concerned about, so-and-so, it really seems like they're turning to their work as some sort of therapeutic solution to these things they're going through in their life. And I just sit there and go, yeah. Mm-hmm. Would you rather they do drugs? Would you the notion that God gave us work for cathartic purposes, that God gave us work and it can be used as a benefit, a healthy diversion to various challenges in life. I don't know why that is lost on people, but by God's grace, it wasn't lost on me. And so that was sort of the tee up in the early formative years. Now you fast forward 30 years later, and I've worked very hard. I am, by God's grace, I've been successful financially and professionally, and all those good things. I'm blessed with an amazing family. There's a lot of wonderful things that happen. There's difficulties that have come up along the way, but that's life, right? But here's the thing. I don't think there's anything in my adult life that people have criticized me more for than working too much. And I don't know that I've ever heard it from anyone but a Christian, but a believer. And I want to be clear on what I'm saying. I have not had people come and say, dude, you're ignoring your family. People don't accuse me of that because I haven't really ignored my family. I mean, there's obviously times in which I could have been better here, better there, and I'm really trying to commit their names to memory, stuff like that. But no, for the most part, like, people are not trying to pull that card, Hey, you keep missing church because of work or something like that. It's not that. It's just this general disdain for people who seem to actually care about excellence in the marketplace, about establishing a position of influence, delivering goods and services at a magnificent way, doing so profitably, and having a grandeur and an ambition and an aspiration behind it all. I think it's a very odd thing for us to focus our moral ire on. And so I want to push back on that, but do so not personally, but theologically.
You made a comment in the book. Did everyone hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Okay,
You got it in front of you there?
just making sure.
You just flipped it open.
No.
I was just going to do that.
Well, you're just gonna do that. Where you were talking about, and I think this is true. A lot of people look at work, very materially. The church, the pastors, they talk about it like it's a very material thing. But you said that there's an immense amount of immaterial benefit to work. And so there's this weird kind of I think the church has a big problem with Gnosticism, but when it comes to work, it doesn't seem like they're really Gnostic. In fact, they don't see any spiritual benefit from work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the Gnosticism that the church inadvertently falls into is in their temptation to view it's more of a dualistic variety, where they are perfectly fine to view pastoral ministry and missionary work and various forms, even applying kind of the quote unquote nonprofit sector, like as if the tax status of the entity provides additional validation to the work.
That's right.
And I do think it comes from their inability to properly understand what's important to God, and the Gnostic error that the notion of there being some sort of inferiority to the material world is a decidedly non-incarnational message.
Hey, David, part of what I was thinking about in the book, because I'm only at chapter 6, so I haven't gotten to the chapter where you start talking about me in chapter 7 yet, so forgive me.
retirement chapter.
But, part of what I was wondering is, are you seeing a difference between how pagans are working versus how Christians are working? And is that Protestant work ethic still strong in Christians, and it's just we're just losing it within the culture itself? Or is there a difference between the two of us?
Yeah, actually, I do have a section I think it's in chapter 10, where I go through different categories, because it isn't so binary. Unfortunately, it would be easy. So many Christians love doing this.
Yeah.
Christians suck, and the only people doing this right are the world. But really, the book is basically pointing out a significant error in the world on this too. But it's not all the world. There is a component of the unsaved world on the other side of the antithesis that are the highest performers in our professional marketplace. And then there is a growing embrace in the secular world, in the unsaved world, of laziness, of removal from the workforce, of reliance on the welfare state, of all sorts of things that are the understandable targets. So it isn't binary. However, within the church, it isn't either. The notion that there is a certain kind of Puritan heritage that's holding strong, and all of us in some form of a Reformed church that still appreciates the reformational message of work, we're doing well, but those gosh darn pietists from the broader evangelical world, they're messing up. I don't really believe it's that simple either. It's just it's tough to come into categories because I think a lot of what I'm targeting applies to parts of the Reformed Church, to parts of the broader evangelical church, and yes, to a significant part of secular unsaved culture.
So then does what that mean is that we're sharing some sort of worldview together. There's a thread that's connecting all of us together if we can all seem to make the same mistakes, right?
Well, let's start with the good side. I think that there are high performers and producers that are working as if they're Christians in some sense in the unsaved world. And I believe this is textbook common grace.
Yeah.
So then
That theologically out of the creation, that we should have no easier time than those of us who self-consciously ascribe to creational theology than understanding the implications of the cultural mandate.
So then this is I'm sorry, go ahead, David. No,
This should be table stakes for us, but it often isn't. And so, but I think your question was more on the negative side of what are the errors that we may get in common. And unfortunately, I think most often, Knox, I think that you have the church's error largely driven by some form of dualism and a pietism, a cultural retreatism. And then I think within the world, it doesn't so much come from that as it does an apathy or a nihilism.
I wonder too if it's just, maybe it seems like Christians though sometimes buy into that too. I mean, they think maybe in the name of I don't want to be a health and wealth guy. They can kind of sort of just say the purposes of God, the ways of God are inscrutable, and who's to say who's going to make it in this world or who's going to succeed, rather than trusting the concrete promises of God and the ordinary way that He works in this world.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what I learned in studying for this book is how much damage dispensationalism did, in the sense of there became a really robust, well-funded, I should add, faith and work movement in 20th century American evangelicalism, and it was almost entirely driven around the notion that the only burden of believers is to save souls and that the world is a lost cause. And so it adopted a form of work that said, yes, let's be more faithful at work, but it was explicitly down on the notion of inherent value of work. It was entirely utilitarian.
Yeah.
Let's go work so we can save souls and fund missions and do some of these other things. And you don't have to say it was subliminal or subconscious. Their very language said, we will obtain the money necessary to go do stuff that really matters.
Right.
Because this work stuff doesn't, but the work can be the means to the end of actually doing the kingdom stuff. So my view is that the kingdom stuff is the work, that the work is a necessary component of what we mean by kingdom. And their view is, no, you do the work to get to the kingdom stuff, which in their case was largely soul saving. So whether it's the dispensational error or not, or just the broader ascent to pietism and fundamentalism that was largely the Christian church's response to modernism.
Yeah.
We just had a really bad century.
That's good. We're on a mission to make magazines great again. So subscribe to our Fight Laugh Feast magazine. This is a quarterly mini book-like experience packed full of a variety of authors, including David Bahnsen from time to time, theologically driven cultural commentary, a psalm of the quarter, recipes for feasting, laughter sprinkled throughout the glossy pages, and more. Sign your church up, sign your grumpy uncle up, and while you're at it, sign up, what does it say, the Pope? Elon Musk?
Yes, I agree.
Go to fightlaughfeast.com right now and sign up to make sure that you don't miss an issue.
Okay, I want to get through all the rest of these questions because I'm really intrigued to know. I want to get practical.
Yeah,
I want to circle back a little bit around one of your demographic question. David, you kind of, one of your chapters was on kind of assessing the worker participation rate.
Yeah.
And going actually through different demographics of what the worker participation rate looks like.
So now you know he only made it to chapter 2, David.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, at least chapter 2. We're going to keep going and see it.
We'll keep going. We're going. So far, I've quoted the introduction and chapter 2. And I'm done.
Next time, David, next time sign your note to Gabe in like chapter
5
or 9 or something.
Which, by the way, is very different than apparently most people read the Bible, because God knows they don't start in Genesis 1 very much.
I got that right. But it seems like we kind of bash the next generation coming up, like they aren't workers, they don't want to work, you know, they want computer jobs, or they want to work their own hours, or they want to work home jobs, whatever. Is that narrative true? Is the next generation going to be worse off in terms of desire to work and effort than kind of maybe some of the current issues our generations may be dealing with?
I don't know the answer to that, because there's a lot of ways in which, just anecdotally, I observe more promise for Gen Z than I felt for Gen Y. And I don't want to do the, paint with a broad brush thing, but all generational theory stuff is broad brush by definition. Yeah. We're dealing with generalizations, and yet, they're generalizations for a reason. I think that the work ethic and expectations of the boomers and Gen X are categorically different than what took place with the millennial generation. And then now with Gen Z, which is a lot younger, there are certain habits of Gen Y that I think Gen Z has picked up, but there are certain changes that may very well prove to be constructive. One thing I'm certain of, Gabe, is that the top 20% of Gen Z is going to be the most productive, innovative, creative, successful in history. The problem is if the middle 30 don't jump along and the bottom 50 don't really, get going, then what that's going to mean to social inequality in our country is incomprehensible. Because you're not going to get the top 20% to slow down. They're not going to do it. Yeah. They're too driven by the purpose of innovation, of invention, of progress. They're just really high performers. And the meritocratic nature of the society is not fully torn down. So those 20 are off and running. But then in the meantime, there's a big group trying to tear down the meritocratic. And if that isn't going to be dealt with, then I fear for how Gen Z could bifurcate.
David, we did we did a. You don't want to follow up on that?
Go ahead.
I was going to go somewhere else. We did a conference a couple weeks ago in Louisiana, and
Cajun Nation,
and had a pastor there ask us a question on helping. He said, I think he said the median income in their county
like $17,000.
Was like $17,000. And he's like, and the theme of the conference is sort of tactics on building Christian community, but thinking of that in sort of kingdom categories, like you and I would, like we would. And so he's asking, some economic questions, like, what do you say to somebody who's making $17,000 a year? On welfare, food stamps, just sort of trying to make it. So you're talking, somebody maybe who's in that boat, sees you in your office and you're working. You've written a book called Full Time. I mean, are you saying to that person, clearly you're just being lazy? Are you? What do you say to somebody, or maybe to a community that is largely in that boat?
Yeah, I believe it's going to end up being the most commonly asked question. I'll share with you guys something that I consider to be really good news. I wasn't sure what to expect. I wrote an article on this subject about the message of faith and work and full-time applied to $17,000 a year earners, applied to blue collar, applied to people that don't have the kind of social strata or socioeconomic strata of a white collar corner office type job like I have. And I submitted it to Christianity Today on purpose, and they are publishing it Wednesday of this week.
Look at God.
Yeah.
And I was really blessed by that. And the reason why is I think that message is very important. And I think the thing I have to say in that message is really important. First of all, Toby, it's by definition a macro and a micro question. You cannot answer that question without macro. How do you get a community to earn more than $17,000 median? You have to have freer markets. You have to have more aspiration for economic growth. You have to have capital investment. I said this when I was with you guys in Moscow.
Yeah.
You're not going to change the world without financial markets. All this disdain for Wall Street. You want private equity money in a town in Louisiana that has $17,000 a year median income. You want venture capital. So there has to be a macro adjustment in terms of all of the things that we already know from the playbook: build wealth, build opportunity, build prosperity over time. But then within the present arrangement that hasn't yet benefited from a macro realignment, what do you say on the micro to a couple of the young people that are dealing with that, that are struggling through it? And the answer has to be faithfulness. I believe that a person making $17,000 a year in tough situation and not seeing great opportunity has to do their hardest work possible, even in what seems like a very empty job. And in some cases, it might behoove some people to move out of those neighborhoods and move to a place that will open up more doors for them and their either current or future family. And I'm sorry that relocation is often part of the recipe here, but that is a distinctly American idea. Dynamism, mobility, often required a lot of relocation to find where opportunity is. But then within a certain pocket, doing the work they can do most faithfully and understanding the scriptural concept of the journey versus the destination.
Yeah.
That what they're doing right now that may be blue collar or menial or janitorial or something like that doesn't have socioeconomic strata could be a springboard to a future opportunity. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book is I did not get hired on Wall Street the week after my dad died. And we were trying to sell his Toyota Celica so we could buy groceries. I worked at a sandwich shop, and I did not make $17,000, by the way. So there's so many greater rags to riches stories than mine. I don't care. I don't want to tout my own journey, but I'm saying I don't speak about this naively. That someone could be in that situation in life and one day not be. I believe that we can change stations in a market economy. And I believe it because I've done it. But I've also observed thousands of others who have done it. So the micro and the macro, I can't talk to that situation without being allowed to talk about the necessity of a market economy. And I can't talk to the micro without saying, you may have to do a job you don't like with gratitude for a period of time.
That's good.
Now, are we going to go backstage?
Full-time work with David Bahnsen, Work and the Meaning of Life. David, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for the sign copy. I got the audio book. I pre-ordered the book. And Dave, if you have some time, we're going to try and go backstage with you, talk a little more.
I got a question about the other side of that coin.
Okay,
what do you
we'll do
when
it
you're
backstage.
rich, and how do you raise your kids well on that side of the coin?
Yeah, like how do you not spoil them?
Yeah.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic. You can ask your questions backstage.
You sit in church week after week, embracing the truth of God's Word. You believe the gospel and claim Jesus Christ as your Lord. Yet you continue to struggle with pornography. You feel like a hypocrite, returning to the sin you hate that mocks the God you love. You desperately wonder, is lasting freedom even possible? Yes, you can overcome pornography, but not alone. 2 Timothy 2:22 says, "Now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Only by repeatedly running from sin to Christ with other believers can you hope to enjoy lasting freedom. You can live with purity and integrity. Take courage, seek accountability, and do whatever is necessary. Get equipped at accountable2you.com.